What's up, guys? So today is a very special video. So we are going to look at one of the most interesting charts you will ever see. This is the chart of the presidency of Donald Trump, or his second inauguration into presidency. So did you know that the exact moment of the inauguration can hold so much information, and it can tell us so much about the future of the next 4 years of his leadership and of the US in general? So that's right, everything from the massive power shifts, potential economic challenges, even national tension, of whatsoever. All of that is written in the stars. And get this, Pluto, which is, the US has been going through a massive Pluto return, which happens once every 248 years, is exactly conjunct the sun and the midheaven on the day of his inauguration, which has never happened in US history. So we'll talk about that. It's extremely rare alignment. There's a lot of other things going on as well. So this 1000% shows the end of one era and beginning of another. And isn't it crazy? It's happening in how many days? In 11 days. So let's buckle in. Let me, there's a lot of jaw-dropping revelations in here. So let's open up this chart and get to it, guys. So let's run the intro. All right, guys, what's up? So this chart is insane. So as you know, you can make a chart for anything. It's not just natal charts, it is charts for events and everything. So when I saw this chart, it blew my mind. The US has been going through a Pluto return, as we know. We have been shown, I'm not in the US, but I do have half American citizenship. So I'm very close to the US culturally, right? I have a lot of friends there and family. So essentially, we have seen how the Pluto return, as maybe you know, has revealed a lot of the shadow aspects of America. And I've said for many years that I believe that America is still ahead, and that a lot of other countries are going to be going through this soon. Their version of this, essentially. Not necessarily Pluto return, but I think that the US has been through a lot in the last few years, right? So people have their different political opinions. I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I don't have a side, just, and if I did, I wouldn't say it. Sun conjunct Pluto is wild. Midheaven, the highest point in the sky, so the inauguration is always at 12 p.m. in the US. So it's always Sun conjunct Midheaven. I wonder why. I wonder why they did that. Because Sun conjunct Midheaven is the highest position of the sun and for a leader. Now, the fact that Pluto is aligning with the sun gives the president this absolute power. Pluto. It's almost so much power, and you think about the House and the Senate being Republican as well. It's very interesting. And essentially, the part of fortune, which is a very, very positive indicator as well, is also conjunct that point, which could also be a very good sign. And I think a lot of people have very negative views. Look, I am very neutral mind. So I'm not coming in here. I like when people talk to me about politics or what's going to happen in the next 4 years, I always say the same thing. I say, look, I understand like certain elements, but like at the same time, we don't know. I'm talking about the world. I'm talking about wars. I'm talking about everything as one, right? We don't know how, like, we think we do, but we don't, right? That's my take on it. So part of fortune would indicate, to me, that this whole elimination of corruption, right? The president actually being able to affect change, which usually, in my opinion, is very rare. And I know people can have their different opinions on this. So I think it's very, very, obviously, Pluto conjunct Midheaven and Sun, it's giving this president extreme power to truly transform the country. And I think that, I find that interesting. Now, there's also a negative side to it, right? Because, Pluto, this can also be very egotistical. It can be, there can be like almost this extreme power, right? And there's a lot of different themes that this can like abuse of power, overusing it, also powerful enemies. It's not always like this shows just the best type of change, right? Because even I was looking at something, it showed that, because there's a very strong fixed star called Altair at around 1 Aquarius, right where Pluto will be, and the sun will be, and it is actually like linked to the Roman Empire. And so, the fact that the US is kind of mimicking that, but we all know what happened to the Roman Empire. But still, Altair is a very, very strong star for leaders, right? Confident, ambitious, bold, right? So it definitely has, it's a very good star for that. Now, the fact that it marks the end of the Pluto return, to me, it's just very, very synchronistic, and the transformation is complete, right? We move on to a new era, and this is really like where things get interesting. So then we look at Moon square Mercury, right? I want to just make sure I have notes on this. I actually took notes. Crazy. So, so Pluto intensifies the leadership qualities, giving Trump a commanding presence on the world stage. This placement often indicates an era-defining leader, right? So that's interesting. And okay, so then we have other aspects. We have the chart as a whole. I need to pull this, have this in front of me. So we have the chart as a whole. Excuse me, guys. And so there's Uranus in the first house. Uranus in Taurus rising, Uranus in the first house with the Taurus-Scorpio axis. So that, Pluto being so impactful in this chart, and Uranus being, with the sun and Pluto, those are two very important planets. So the fact that Uranus is there, it does symbolize this massive change in identity. And because I think that there's a lot around money and around the country's wealth in this chart. Now, I'm not going to act like I can understand it completely, because you have Venus conjunct Saturn in Pisces, which is meant to be kind of confusing, in the 11th house, which is linked to massive, 11th house, which is linked to massive wealth. So people have different ideas of like the Venus conjunct Saturn. They say it could be related to women's rights being more, kind of the whole thing with abortions and all that. Hardships for women and women values. So that's one interpretation. But Venus is a lot. Saturn is tradition. Venus is values. Pisces definitely adds a little twist to it, where it's meant to be a little bit confusing and a little bit difficult for us to know. But it is money as well. 11th house is a good house for money. So it could be something positive, that there is some difficulty at the start, but it gets better with time, where it's almost like creating a strong foundation. I hate to bring examples, but like in Argentina where I live, it's very, very difficult right now. But what the president's trying to do is he's trying to set a strong foundation for the future. But in doing so, it's been very, very hard for a lot of people, right? Cutting lots of government jobs and government programs to decrease costs and all these things. So I'm not saying my opinion on that, but that's one thing, right? Let's see what else I have. So yeah, it definitely could be lots of different things. It could be like a tighter control also, if we're looking at it more pessimistically, tighter control over resources or over the economic system. But in Pisces, there can also always be a vagueness to that. Now, the fact that Uranus is playing so heavy in this chart, to me, with Pluto, just shows how transformational this day is, and these next 4 years will be, and how there will be the Venus, the chart ruler, that also represents the collective. And I think in Pisces, there could be a consolidation of a more spiritual, more togetherness, even though it doesn't seem like it right now, right? And that also brings me to my next point with Moon square Mercury. So this one is very, very, very telling. Moon in Libra, square Mercury in And of course, the North Node is conjunct Neptune also. So we can't forget that there's almost this like spiritual leaning for the country. It's almost like on a spiritual level, the country is in its very high Pisces Neptune, right? 29-degree Pisces North Node. So I'm not saying Trump is directly responsible for this. This is beyond him. But yeah, I think that there's a lot in this chart to me that indicates a forced change in the sense of like, I always talk about this movement from Taurus to Scorpio, where like a Taurus South Node, Scorpio North Node, where you're used to having things a certain way, but then something happens that pulls you out of it. Sometimes it's a crisis. I'm not saying there's gonna be a crisis. I'm saying that it does get you closer to that level of individualism that you ultimately want, right? Regardless. So I would say, looking at this from a different angle, I think that it's a very strong chart for money. I think that like if I had to predict that America would become very, very powerful on the world stage with this president, I think that, to me, intuitively and just in general, I think that a lot of I think that there's going to be problems still, of course, but I think that a lot of that has to do with consolidation of. There's a lot in the U.S. It's very complicated to go to try to explain the U.S. economy, right? But there's a lot that is undermanaged that can be changed. That I feel like, if changed, can lead to very, very obvious small things that can lead to massive growth. So to me, yeah. But you also have Mars on the IC. So there's a lot more. I was going to make this a short video. I know I'm at over like 11, 12 minutes. I try to make my video shorter, but this one, there's just so much to say. So the moon being opposite, well, it's actually quincunx. Okay. So that could indicate some part of the populace being very unhappy with some of these changes that are happening, especially in the short term, economically. And also, we have to show that the Mars retrograde on the IC in Cancer, the sign of America, could show tensions within, right? This is not something new. Mars on the IC, it's the foundation, it's the bottom of the chart. That could show anger, disputes, obviously, between the two sides, the two wings. So I know I talked about unity. I meant more of like that there's an ability for the country on a spiritual level, and sometimes it's through tough times, like you see in Los Angeles right now, to come together, right? So there is that opportunity, there is that potential, but also that Mars in Cancer, to me, that can indicate a lot. We'll get into that in a sec, but I see, in terms of prosperity, a lot of positivity. Even Jupiter in the first house too. Very close to, it's right on the edge of the first and second. And yeah, so the moon in Libra square Mercury in the ninth house in Capricorn. So first of all, I think that on its own, and you have that trine between Uranus and Mercury. To me, that is genius inventions. Maybe someone living in the U.S. or some people, maybe there's a big scientific innovation, right? And also the ability, ninth house, to communicate, Capricorn, in a congruent and very, very pragmatic way with other nations. Now, I see this, when I look at it internally, as being more linked to a imbalance between the populace and the emotional ideas of the country. I think that speaks to a lot of difficulty, right? A lot of difficulty between, like, Moon square Mercury is emotions versus logic, and the tension between those two. So not really knowing what to do on that level. So yeah, that emotional versus logic divide. So there could be, yeah, between the emotional rhetoric and the more logical policy, there could be a clash between those two. So this could be, more of a polarization between the intuitive and, the intuitive response to something or to some things, and the more rational, logical. So that could legitimately be the people who, are more logical minded versus more emotional mind, or more intuitive, people. Yeah, I think you guys get what I'm trying to say. It could mean a lot of things. But also another big thing with Mercury square Moon is miscommunication issues. So it could be, some tension that comes from not necessarily what the administration says, but how they say it, right? So how they communicate. So then you have Mars on the IC. Now this is such an important part, because Mars on the IC, like I said, it's in Cancer, the sign of the U.S. that represents the family, that represents the not the populace, but the country itself, Cancer, the home, patriotism, etc. So that could be, that's kind of a dangerous point, right? That could be unrest, conflict, even civil disputes, heightened aggression, all that kind of internal fighting. So that's one part of the chart that I see all this power. I see all this power and all this I don't want to say dominance. I think on the world stage, it's like, wow, U.S. is going to regain its power in a way. That's what I'm not, okay, I just made a prediction. I don't like making predictions, but I think it's the start of something better in that sense, right? But then you have all these problems that are well documented. And Mars in the IC definitely does indicate, because you see, if you're in the zeitgeist of America, you see this big clash already between these two very different types of people, where it's so different that it should be two different countries, but it isn't. And that doesn't just improve overnight. Even with money, even if Trump comes in and the economy just goes crazy, all these jobs come back to America, all this industry, just macroeconomic indicators, everything, people are able to afford things again, whatever, that still won't change the hatred that so many people have, not just for him, but for what he represents. It's more symbolic, and it's very, very symbolic. And so Mars on the IC, that could also, in Cancer, that could also be a very emotional, tribal, slow burn, but you don't mess with the Cancer, Like Mars in Cancer gets a rep of being a little bit like mellow, but why are so many athletes Mars is in Cancer? Cancer is like another one of these misunderstood zodiac signs. Okay, let's see what else I got. So opposition to authority. So this is like challenges to leadership, right? And potentially from internal factions or grassroots movements. That's definitely possible. But then also what this could represent is more of an agenda, like an action-oriented agenda by the administration to completely reconstruct the foundations, Cancer, I see, of the country on an emotional level, what it means to be an American, etc. So that's the more positive take on it, is that it's like everything is being redone from the very foundations. And we don't know. I mean, like I made a post yesterday on Instagram about it was more of like a creative writing type of thing, less than astrology. It was a lot about this feeling of not knowing, right? Where with, like, for example, with these LA fires, right? You have all these different theories about everything. You have people who think that it's made by it's manufactured. You have people who are talking about the science behind it and how this was always meant to happen, or this was always going to happen. But then you have people who are like, okay, well, even if it was always meant to happen, why were they not hiding this stuff? There's always these extremes, and then I wrote in the post, this is a little bit off topic, that I just don't have many opinions today, because I could see why different ones would be right. But regardless, that's not what this video is about. So the fact that we are done, so the big, yeah, obviously there's a lot of questions, you know, like even with this video, you're probably left with more questions than answers, but at least you have some idea. I want to look at the chart one more time. With the transits too. Well, what am I saying with the transits, of course? I mean, I meant to say with the natal chart. To me, the fact that you have a chart that is so perfectly aligned with this energy of Pluto and Aquarius, it to me makes me think that the U.S. is really leading the charge with this new timeline, with this new era of the world. And how that will turn out, I'm not going to act like I know. I also want to highlight that, you know, Mars is retrograde, so it could be on the IC. It could be a slow burn, a slow attack. That the moon is quincunx that Venus, right, and that Saturn. So there's definitely a lot of things that are. It's not just like, oh, amazing. It's also just not. It's also not like, oh, perfect. The thing, yeah. So like as I said before, what I really get is a strong, you know, with a Taurus ruled, you know, chart with Venus in the 11th. I mean, that is very, very good for money, for economically. But what it means internally for the country, for the people, that's, you know, we see clues to the aspects. You know, the Pluto on the Sun on the Midheaven. Midheaven is close to Vega also, which is another powerful star, Capricorn. So everything on that end to me is like, okay, we get it. But what does this new era mean? Does it mean a new era of corruption, or does it mean a new era of freedom of the people, right? That is so much, and to act like we know, this is one thing I've learned in time, people, and I've gone down all the rabbit holes. Not all of them, but I've put my mind in so many different places. I listen to things I don't believe in just to hear a perspective. The more you know you know less. So we just have to embrace the change, accept it, and just try to lean into the present moment, to love, to gratitude. Now, this is my little conclusion, but this is what I said in my post yesterday. You know, there's so much in this world that we don't know, and as humans, we want to automatically assume, oh yeah, this is my opinion on this is my opinion on that. Guys, it's so much easier when we just sit back and we can admit. There's so much power and relaxation and balance that comes when we can just admit, I don't know. I just don't know. That very thought gives so much power to what we do truly know. Like I was saying in my post, I know through direct experience that God exists. I know that astrology is real, right? I know certain things, but there's so much I don't know. And until I know all the proof, I might have an intuitive hunch, right? That's very, very strong. But until I see that completely proven, there's just been times where I've thought I knew for sure that, and then I was wrong. Not like so many, but yeah, it definitely happened. So anyways, that's it for today. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. A little different style of video, but I hope you guys enjoy. And I'll talk to y'all later. Ciao, bye-bye.